By early 1945, Hitler's Third Reich was dying. I mean, really dying. In the West, our boys and the British had pushed all the way to the Rhine. In the East, Stalin's Red Army was crossing the Polish border, pouring into Germany like a flood. The Germans fought back hard, don't get me wrong, but everyone knew how this story was going to end. By May, Hitler would be dead, and Germany would be finished. So February rolls around, and we've got this massive force assembled near the Rhine, ready for that final push. Montgomery's up north with his 21st Army Group, all those British and Canadian troops. Below him, you've got Bradley's 12th Army Group, and that included Patton's 3rd Army. Now, if you know anything about Patton, you know that guy was itching for a fight. Montgomery kicks things off on February 8th with this two-pronged attack near Bonn. The northern columns hacking through these thick woods, real slow going. The southern group, they get stopped cold when the Germans blow open a bunch of dams and flood everything. Took over 2 weeks before these two forces could link up on the west bank. But by early March, Montgomery's sitting pretty with about 60 miles of riverbank under control. Now comes the hard part, crossing that river. Down south, Bradley's armies are moving east too, looking for any way across. And here's where it gets interesting. March 7th, our guys reach Cologne. Hitler's ordered every bridge blown to hell, right? But then, and I love this part, as they're pushing further south, they spot this one bridge still standing near a little town called Remagen. One bridge, can you believe it? So they make a run for it, fighting off whatever Germans are left defending it. They're almost across when boom, explosion. But somehow, that bridge is still there. Our boys sprint across, cutting any wire that looks like it might blow the thing. Then our commanders start pushing everyone across as fast as they can. We'd finally broken through into the German heartland. Back in Berlin, Hitler goes absolutely nuts when he hears about Remagen. 5 junior officers get court-martialed, 4 of them shot. And the German commander in the West, this guy von Rundstedt, he gets fired. Second time in less than a year, poor bastard. They bring in Kesselring to replace him, the guy who'd been running things in North Africa and Italy. For the next week, the Germans are throwing everything they've got at that bridge. Air attacks, day and night. None of them work. Then, on March 17th, while our engineers are fixing it up, the whole thing just collapses. 28 men went down with it. Just like that, our first route into Germany was cut off. But up north, Montgomery's planning something big. The first major Allied crossing of the Rhine. March 23rd, he unleashes hell. 200 Lancaster bombers basically erase this town called Wesel off the map. Then British commandos cross in these amphibious vehicles called buffaloes. The Germans are so shell-shocked, they barely put up a fight. Division after division crosses all through the night. Next day, and this is the biggest airborne operation of the entire war, 17,000 paratroopers from the British 6th and our 17th Airborne drop in to grab key positions on the other side. The German anti-aircraft fire is murder. Over half the gliders get torn apart before they even land. But within a few hours, those paratroopers link up with Montgomery's ground forces, and that bridgehead is secure. Now, this should have been Montgomery's big moment, his triumph. But here's the thing, Patton beat him to it. The night before Montgomery's big show, Patton had already crossed near Oppenheim and was inside Germany. Classic Patton move. The rivalry between these guys was something else, let me tell you. Everyone wanted to be first into Germany. Over the next few days, we're crossing all over the place. German defenses along the Rhine just crumble. Montgomery pushes deeper towards Munster. Bradley's forces, including Patton, are heading east towards Marburg. They circle Frankfurt and just keep going. Some German troops are still fighting like fanatics, but by now, everybody knows it's over. It's just a question of when the Germans will admit it. While we're fighting our way through Western Germany, the Red Army in Poland is getting ready for their own massive push. And let me tell you, the Germans on that front are in bad shape. They're so low on weapons, they're using rifles from World War I. Can you imagine? German intelligence figures the Russian infantry outnumbers them 11-1, plus the Russians have way more tanks, way more artillery. Hitler's already burned through his strategic reserve on our front. The Germans have got nothing left. January 12th, the Russian offensive starts with this artillery barrage that stretches 300 miles. A week later, they're in Warsaw. Then they're racing west towards the German border, 300 miles away. Another Soviet force takes Krakow on January 18th. As the Russians sweep across Poland, they leave these pockets of German resistance behind in cities like Poznan to deal with later. By the end of January, Soviet troops have crossed into Germany and reached the Oder River. They're now about an hour's drive from Berlin. For this Russian commander, Zhukov, veteran guy, really knew his stuff. This is huge. He's covered 300 miles in 14 days, one of the fastest, longest advances in military history. So Zhukov's guys pause to catch their breath and bring up supplies. More Soviet armies dig into their south along the Neisse River. Meanwhile, a third Russian force entraps what's left of the German armies in East Prussia up in this Baltic port called Königsberg. Here's where Hitler does something bizarre, even for him. He puts Himmler in charge of forces in the region. Himmler, the SS chief. The guy has zero military experience. Zero. During February, troops under Himmler get absolutely shredded by the Russians. And get this, Hitler could have sent reinforcements. There's this big German force stuck in the Courland Peninsula in Latvia, doing nothing. But Hitler refuses to let them withdraw and help out. He's obsessed with holding territory, even when it makes no sense. So 200,000 German troops sit there for the rest of the war, accomplishing absolutely nothing. The Red Army is now preparing for the final assault on Berlin, less than 50 miles away. And in Germany, civilians are panicking. The Russians have seen what the Germans did in the Soviet Union. Whole towns destroyed, people massacred. Now they want revenge, and the stories coming back are horrific. Rape, murder, pillaging. In the snow and freezing cold, over 5 million German civilians flee west looking for safety. 2 million people get evacuated by sea from Baltic ports, but they're sitting ducks for Soviet submarines. 24 German passenger ships get torpedoed. One of them, the Wilhelm Gustloff, has over 10,000 people on board. Less than 1,000 survive. Worst loss of life at sea from a single incident, ever. Hitler's chief of staff, Guderian, is begging him to bring troops back from our front to defend Berlin. Hitler agrees and recalls the elite 6th SS Panzer Army. But he doesn't send them to Berlin, he sends them to Hungary. Why? Because he's fixated on defending the Hungarian oil fields. It's a terrible decision. In Hungary, the panzers are completely outnumbered. Then the weather turns and everything becomes mud. They struggle for days but get pushed back into Austria, then get sucked into defending Vienna as the Red Army advances. The 6th SS Panzer Army is finished. Their commander, Sepp Dietrich, actually says, "We call ourselves the 6th Panzer Army because we have only 6 panzers left." On April 10th, the Russians sweep through and take Vienna. Now the big question becomes, who's going to reach Berlin first, us or the Russians? It's not just military anymore, it's political. By March, the Red Army is lined up on the Oder, ready for that final assault. Berlin is less than 300 miles from our advanced positions. Most of our commanders want to race for it, beat the Russians there. But here's the problem. At this conference in Yalta the month before, the Allied leaders divided Germany into zones of influence. Berlin is inside the Russian zone, so Eisenhower gets told to forget about Berlin and focus on taking the rest of the country. April 1st, our troops surround the German industrial cities in the Ruhr. The Germans put up a hell of a fight. When the area finally falls 2 weeks later, we take over 325,000 prisoners, biggest haul of the war. The German commander, this Nazi field marshal named Model, kills himself. Everywhere else, resistance is spotty. Bradley's armies are storming across Germany. By April 18th, our forces punch through to the Czech border, cutting Germany in half. Up north, Montgomery's Canadians start liberating Holland. The Dutch had a brutal winter in 44-45. The Germans deliberately took their food and fuel. People were starving, freezing to death. Our guys take Arnhem on April 15th, then Groningen the next day. Pretty soon there's a German army surrounded near Amsterdam and a ceasefire gets worked out. We start dropping food and medical supplies from planes. At the same time, the British Second Army is racing across northern Germany. They take Osnabrück, then hit Bremen. That's a tough fight. 9 days of house-to-house combat before they secure the port. 2 days later, they reach the Elbe. As we're advancing, we start finding these concentration camps. Early April, our troops overrun one at Ohrdruf near Weimar. Eisenhower visits and he looks like he's seen a ghost. The SS evacuated most of the prisoners, but left piles of bodies behind. 8 days later, British troops find another camp at Belsen, north of Hanover. 70,000 prisoners, thousands already dead, the rest starving and sick. This BBC correspondent, Richard Dimbleby, does this radio broadcast. He says, "I passed through the barrier and found myself in a nightmare world. The living lay with their heads against corpses. Around them moved this awful ghostly procession of emaciated people with nothing to do and no hope of life. It was as though they were waiting their turn. This is what the Germans did. Let there be no mistake, deliberately and slowly." Down in Italy, the German front's collapsing too. The Allies launch a spring offensive. The German commander von Vietinghoff knows he can't hold. On April 29th, he surrenders unconditionally. Takes effect on May 2nd. First formal surrender of German forces anywhere in Europe. Back in Germany, American and Russian forces meet up on the Elbe near Leipzig on April 26th.